I wanted to say thank you all for being here tonight and being here to learn about what shoes are right for you. Jeremiah is from Runner's Alley, which is in Manchester. There's one in Manchester, there's one in Concord, and there's one in Portsmouth. They analyze your gaits. They look at everything and see what shoes are good for you when you're walking, running, whatever it may be. Okay, so he's the expert at this. And I asked them if they could come in, and they were nice enough to say, yeah, I'll come by and show you what's going on. They have been paramount in helping me with my triathlons. I have a lot of different sneakers and stuff that I use for different types of training, and they've been great at it. So they have a lot of knowledge and everything. We do the orthotics here, but I always refer people to them to get the get orthotics that are simpler made, that will support your feet prior to getting actual, more expensive custom-made fit orthotics. So if you have questions, I'm sitting in with you guys too. So let's welcome Jeremiah and let him do his thing.
Hey guys. Cool. Well, yeah. As Dr. Sam said, I work for Runner's Alley. Runner's Alley is a running specialty store. It doesn't mean that we're just for runners, but it does mean that we take a look at the mechanics of what's going on with people's feet and try and find the appropriate footwear for them. I've been doing that since about 1997, so we're coming up on 20 years. Started in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. Janine Sylvester had a little bit of a background in nursing, and then she kind of walked into the store in Colorado where they took a look at what was going on with her feet and actually gave her suggestions about her running shoes, which she thought was like nobody had ever done it before for her. She thought it was amazing. So she ended up dropping everything and going and interning with them for a long time. Me personally, I started fitting running shoes at a small running specialty shop called Marathon Sports. You might have heard of it. Anybody? No? Yeah? Cool. Down there in Boston. I started that in the year 2004. So I've been doing this for a bit. Okay. So what we're looking for today is kind of the right shoe for you, right? And that is a very interesting subject. As you can tell, I've put a ton of different shoes out here. They all look a little bit different. They all kind of serve a purpose here. Before we get to all these bad boys and girls, we're going to talk about kind of what we do. So we do a gait analysis when people come in. We take a look at the mechanics of what's going on in their foot shape and try to match that to the appropriate shoe. Before we do that, one of the keys to this process is two things. Is actually you guys. So, do you mind if I?
No, absolutely. As a matter of fact, you can bring it over there if you want to.
Yeah. Well,
there's a eraser right on the bottom.
This big guy?
Yeah.
Oh, awesome. Cool. Okay, and what I mean when I said it kind of starts with you guys?
You can bring it right out over here. Okay. You'll put your computer right over there.
Cool.
Yeah. This one you have to.
Okay, so anybody know what I'm kind of getting at here? First thing that we're going to look at is your activity, right? So who here is a runner? Anybody? Triathlete?
Yeah.
Cool. Anybody do active walking? Okay, just a little bit. Anybody looking for shoes for work? Yeah. Okay, cool. Anybody go on the trails and hike? Okay. So you notice we've got a lot of different hands going on here? Okay. So your activity is going to actually help us determine what makes sense for you. Somebody who's doing a triathlon might not need the same shoe for obvious reasons as somebody who's hiking. And working is going to be a little bit different than active walking as well. So we do want to kind of make sure that we kind of start by talking to you guys and figure out what's going on. Okay, the next thing, we kind of get into a little bit of some stuff that overlaps. And this is kind of one of our, my handwriting is horrible. I was an English major in college, so. Biomechanics, which sounds kind of a little bit, vague, but basically it's how we're talking about mostly the kinetic chain and how you guys walk, how you guys run, how you guys do the activities that you're doing. Okay, so that's to do with your leg structure, has to do with your foot structure, has to do with kind of muscle groups and how tight those are, although we don't get into that too deeply. So we kind of want to look at how you're moving. And when you're walking versus when you're running, there's going to be some differences in your gait that are going to help us to kind of figure out what's going on. Part of that is impact level. So when you're running, you're actually putting 3 times your body weight down. So we'll add in what I call stature. So everybody's coming at it from a slightly different weight, right? And so the more stress that you're putting onto the shoe, the differently that shoe is going to respond for different people. Does that make sense? Any questions so far? You can just holler at me. I like to talk a lot. So stature comes into play. So somebody who weighs 95 pounds and somebody who weighs 200 pounds, they're going to affect different forces on the shoe. So we want to make sure that the shoes help work with what you're bringing, right? Okay. This one kind of seems obvious, but we'll put it out there as well. Oops. There's a very old adage, right? If the shoe fits,
Wear it.
there we go. That's basically what it's all about. So foot shape, and we're talking about some things, like I said, that kind of overlap. That kind of gets into your biomechanics a little bit. How your foot is shaped is sometimes indicative of how you absorb shock, but oftentimes, the shoe has to fit. Okay. And then last but not least, and this is very overarching here, history. Does anybody know what I'm talking about when I talk about history?
Injured?
Genetics.
Injuries, genetics, anything else?
Arthritis.
Arthritis, perfect. What about possible preferences with shoes? What types of shoes you might have worn before? Where you're at in terms of your activity? If you're just getting into like a beginner 5K group versus running your 5th marathon, you're going to be coming at it with a slightly different perspective of what works for you in the past and what you're going for. So this is kind of some things that you're bringing, right, to the process. Now the shoe companies want to sell shoes. Pretty simply, right? Luckily they have this great pavement everywhere. It really helps them out. People like to pound that pavement, as we call it. So they're trying to figure out, to be successful at selling shoes, how the feet and body work under different stresses on different surfaces and in different activities. Okay. At Runner's Alley, as the name might suggest, we carry running shoes. So the big question that we get all the time is, well, I'm not a runner, so what is this going to do for me? Well, that kind of gets back into the biomechanics a little bit, and we'll kind of start to talk about how those things come together. But basically, running shoes make great walking shoes as well. They make great standing shoes. Because, well, for one reason, these companies spend a lot of time and money actually trying to figure out how they can best support and cushion a foot. Okay? So that's where their bread and butter is. If they don't do that very well, runners aren't going to buy their shoes. And so they're not going to be doing anything much at all. So what they end up doing is they end up designing over many years. Every year they come out with a new model of shoes. Shoes that basically are introducing a layer of material between your foot and the ground. And has anybody read Born to Run? No? Yeah. There's some different theories about kind of what constitutes a good amount of support and structure under your foot, or whether your foot actually even needs it. But for most of us, a bit of sole to the shoe actually really helps. Now, what they end up doing is they end up kind of figuring out 2 different things, 3 different things really. Support, cushion, and shape. Okay. So a shoe that's built these days is going to have a few different components, and it's just good to know, I guess, even if you don't want to become a shoe geek. The most important part for just everybody, for the most part, is going to be this midsole. Okay. So this is made out of a number of different types of materials depending on the company, which is kind of the cushion component. But basically it's there to provide both some cushion for when your foot is hitting the ground and also some structure to some extent to kind of help control motion, especially as you're going kind of medial to lateral, right? As you're going from heel to toe. So you have a shoe like this, going to pass this along, give that a twist, pretty light, pretty flexible. On the other side of the scale, you have a shoe kind of like this. You can start to see a little bit of a difference there. That seems like it's very thin, right? This seems like it's pretty chunky. Again, part of this is marketing. They don't have to make this shoe blue and gray. They can make it all one color if they want, but they want to call out something super special about this shoe. And basically what this is kind of a shoe that's designed for a little bit more pronations in the foot. So it's going to be a little bit stiffer. So what they're trying to do is they're trying to come up with a few different materials that all kind of come together to make sure that as your foot's kind of going from heel to toe, it's not collapsing too far and it's not going too far out.
Can you just explain to them what pronation is?
Sure, yeah, definitely. So just know that there's some shoes that are very flexible and there's some shoes that are very stiff. Pass that around. Kind of give that
your
one.
arch support?
Arch supports we'll get into in just a second. First, we're going to back up into pronation. So when we're looking at the mechanics of people's feet, the pronation, the word pronation comes out a lot. People always want to know if they pronate, do they pronate, how much do they pronate, is it a bad thing that they pronate too much, the feet hurt because they pronate. And basically pronation is kind of one of the ways your body's kind of absorbs shock. And, okay, not everybody can see this. But in any case, as you're kind of coming down, you're putting weight down on your foot, the arch of your foot basically is going to flex. And you're going to come from a position generally a little bit more kind of on that lateral side down into kind of more of a nice kind of neutral position hopefully. So as your foot impacts with the ground, it basically flexes and you're coming from a little bit out to a little bit in. So that motion of the foot in terms of what we see, we really kind of generalize it to, is called pronation. So everybody's foot pronates. It's basically your way of absorbing shock. Okay? Does that make sense? Okay. So kind of what we end up doing is we take a look at that. We're also looking at what's going on in the kinetic chain. So we're looking at as you're taking a step and we start barefoot, how does that foot pronate? How does that foot rotate in? A ton, not so much. Just kind of nice in the middle. Ideally what we want is we want this knee to be tracking pretty square right over your foot when your weight's square on your foot. Okay? Everybody does this differently. And we can kind of get everybody into bare feet and watch everybody walk and we'll notice some different things going on. We're also looking at the rotation of the foot, okay, whether it's rotated in or out, right? We're looking at the structure of the leg, so how your knee is in relation to your ankle and your hip. So whether your knee is, whether you're bow-legged or knock-kneed, for example, right? Then we can go back to, duck-footed or pigeon-toed.
Yep.
So those are kind of ways of thinking about it, right? And all these things people might have told you actually affect how you absorb shock. Makes sense. We're also kind of looking.
And criticism.
Criticism? That's okay. People always find it as a negative, and we don't really think of it that way. But given that everybody's feet are moving differently, that's where all these different kinds of shoes start to come into play, right? So for some people, again, if our goal is to get that knee and that ankle to line up properly, if that arch and ankle are really collapsing inwards as you're putting pressure on it, you might want a little bit of a stiffer shoe, right? So a little bit of shoe that's harder to twist because that's what your foot's trying to do to the shoe. Okay? Hopefully that's
Pronation really
Yeah.
hurt your knees?
Not necessarily. And I mean, there's definitely some studies that basically you can think of it as an acceptable range of pronation, right? If your foot doesn't pronate enough and your arch stays really rigid and you come down, that shock's going to come right up your leg anyways. And if your ankle kind of comes down all the way to kind of high-fiving the floor, that's not going to be so great either. And what that's also doing is it's throwing off your alignment of your knee and your hip. So this whole system that works to help absorb shock can't do it as well, right? So everybody says, oh, pronation's bad. No, it's great. It's just about how much. And sometimes you'll see somebody that has a bit more motion in their foot, and you say, well, do you have any injuries? And nope, everything's good. Okay. So that comes back into history as well. So we're kind of looking at what's going on, not only there at the floor, but also kind of what's been working out well for you in the past. So shoes, we're going to kind of work with that motion of the foot and the leg, and we're going to try and figure out what types of shoes work, okay? Now the companies have figured out that everybody runs a little bit differently, and walks differently too. So what they're trying to do is they're trying to make as many shoes as possible for the most part, to fit as many types of feet as possible so they can sell shoes to everybody. If they can sell shoes to every single person, they'd be happy. There's definitely some shoes that work out better for some people than others, and there's definitely some companies that are niche. But most of the time, when you're looking at one of these shoes, you're looking at a few different parts. Looking at that midsole, so that's kind of the meat and potatoes of the shoe. It's got some cushiony parts, it's got some stiff parts, and it's basically there to get you from this impact point here and then straight off the front here, okay? So it's trying to guide your foot forward, which results in that motion that we were looking at barefoot, starting here and then kind of rotating in. So you want to start here, but when you want to push off, you're going to be pushing off relatively off the front if we do our job right. So they build this shoe on a mold, which is a last, okay? So that kind of adds into this next component, which is shape. So you have a shoe like this. And let's see. Okay. Really simple, I mean, right? Straight, curve. The person whose foot really fits the shape of this shoe is not going to necessarily be as comfortable in a shoe that's a little bit straighter, and vice versa, okay? And that is partially just like comfort, but it's also about mechanics. So if we have a person who has a very straight kind of shaped foot, say that arch has dropped a bit and it flattens out and straightens out the shape of that foot, when we put them into a more curved shoe, more likely than not, you're getting some overhang on the sides, right? And so that's not going to allow this shoe, which is designed for a particular shape, to work as properly, okay? It's going to do some weird things. Your weight's going to go to some places where you're not actually on a shoe. It's not because the shoe's a bad shoe, it's just because it's not the right shoe for you. So we take a look at stuff like shape, pretty simple. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
So that would also hold true for any other like work shoes or boots or anything
Yeah,
else.
and totally.
Because they all have different shapes.
Yep,
like
every
that.
shoe's built on a last. Yeah.
Okay.
And so you're looking at, it's actually a three-dimensional thing. It's not necessarily two-dimensional,
Yeah.
but that's very easy to see, right? So you can
Yeah.
start to kind of figure it out. So you're also looking at depth and everything. But yeah, I mean, the trouble is in certain professions, either culturally. So if you're wearing suits all day, you're
Right.
probably going to be wearing a dress shoe.
Right.
They're more designed to look cool or look professional as opposed to like this. And this probably doesn't really strike anybody's style chords, right? I mean, it's not really looking too hot, but it works really darn well. And so that's either cultural or work boots.
Right.
Work boots are going to deal with, hey, not cutting off your toes, stuff like that. It's
Yeah.
a little bit of a different ball of wax.
But you still can look at the shape and
Yep.
say, okay, is this the right
Well,
shape?
totally.
Yeah.
And you can kind of look at that, but it might be a little bit more tricky to find shoes
Right.
that would necessarily match your foot shape, and that's something we can always talk about a little bit too. We don't have a super deep knowledge of dress shoes, for example.
Right.
I like Cole Haan personally, but or work boots for that matter. But we can definitely kind of tell you, okay, we want to look at this. The fact of the matter is you're going to have to sometimes make do a little bit with what's available. But yeah, I mean, we do want to make sure that some basic fit things are going on here. So go back to this guy. Everybody kind of poked and prodded this. This is one of the stiffest shoes that we carry. Bought it for a good reason. You can notice though that they have very similar shapes. Okay. So, not only are we looking at kind of the shape of the foot in the shoe, but this guy, super stiff, this guy's actually really soft, okay, and a bit more flexible through here. And so what you end up having is you start to have a mix of shape and support, is what we usually call it, but you can also call it structure. And ultimately, you're looking at stability. So you could have two people that have very low arches and a very straight shaped foot, for example. And as you watch them walk, the person for the more flexible shoe is actually going to line up with their knee pretty well, even if that arch is really low. And a person who's going to find this more comfortable is generally going to have that ankle pronate a really decent amount. Okay, and so you could even look at the shape of their foot, and you could put them in some different shoes depending on the motion. Does that make sense?
The majority of even those things, I don't see a lot of arch support.
Yep.
When you're talking lasts,
Yeah.
you're talking athletic when you're up there talking shoes as opposed to dress shoes. But
Yeah.
I find that maybe the past 25 years that arch support is not an integral part of a
Yeah.
shoe.
Yeah. So I mean, when you're looking at how they're trying to support your foot, even the stiffest shoe, there's
Why
no-
isn't why aren't shoes built with this arch support in the last or in the
Yeah.
components of the basic
Yeah.
shoe?
So I mean, really, ultimately, what they're trying to do is they're trying to keep that alignment good between your knee and your ankle. And I mean, this again comes into history too, and we're talking about custom orthotics as well. So I'm imagining there's a lot of that. But they also want your arch to work as well as it can inside the shoe. They want to give your arch the freedom to pronate inside the shoe.
Not stay in a stirrup
Yeah.
position.
So if you have, if you constantly have that underneath your foot 24/7, you're kind of losing some of your ability to naturally absorb shock.
Flex.
Yeah, and pronate. And so you want to find that balance of a shoe that's going to allow your foot to move as naturally as possible. And for a lot of people, it's not this stiff shoe, right? I mean, and for a lot of people, it's not a pair of Vibram 5 fingers, as anybody know that.
I wear them.
Yeah. So I mean, they're basically like, gloves for your feet, basically. So that's kind of interesting. Most people are kind of in the middle, and it depends on your activity.
And they
So-
stopped making those.
Oh, they still do. Yeah, definitely. And the funny thing is they're actually an outsole manufacturer. So you'll find, I'm not sure if they're this guy, but a lot of the trail shoes will actually have Vibram outsoles too. So they do just fine. And I don't think that the problem was necessarily that the shoes were bad. It's just most people threw them on their feet, thought that they were going to solve everything, but they're basically not used to having their feet not have anything there. And so they kind of went out there, and for runners, like they might have run 10 miles and said, well, this sucks. It's like I'm running, well, you're running barefoot, and they're not used to that. So there you have some issues. And of course, again, going back to history, if you have some arthritis or there's something going on and you need some extra structure because there's something specifically wrong with your foot, then
How long's the average assessment at your?
20 to 30 minutes. And that includes demoing. I mean, the process of kind of going through kind of the standing and walking and maybe a little bit of running, even if you aren't running, is probably 2 minutes. It's not too bad. So you're looking at some different types of shoes. Like I said, most every shoe is designed to get you from here to here, but not every shoe actually. It's where Vibram 5 fingers kind of comes into play. The less shoe that you end up having underneath your foot, ideally, especially this is more running, I would say, than walking, but the more they want you to kind of transition your impact point from your heel, which doesn't have any natural shock absorption to it.
You're wearing.
These are kind of in between. They're a little bit more flexible, but they actually have a decent pitch to them. We'll talk about that in a second too. So they wanted to maybe transition your point of impact from here to here. So as most shoes will also have cushioning. They'll put maybe a cushion pad here and a cushion pad here. For somebody who's running up on their midfoot, that cushion pad's actually going to be up here. They're still going to have some cushion in the back. But they're going to have a bit more up here.
I see that.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, you do have a number of different things. You have trail shoes, right? Trail shoes are going to have a much better grip on the bottom. They're going to have actually a little bit of a rock plate in there, make great light hiking shoes, trail running shoes. A little bit more weather resistance on the upper. You got your majority of regular running shoes. You also have shoes that end up having a little bit of a different design to it. Okay. One is the one we're passing around from Newton, and that shoe is designed with actually there are 5 lugs now. 5 lugs up in the midfoot, which have a membrane and a recessed anti-lug kind of underneath that. So as your foot puts pressure on the front of that shoe, it compresses up into the shoe and then it gives back.
What brand is that?
This is Hoka. This is actually
Okay,
pretty popular
okay.
brand these days. So they actually came out about the same time as people were really getting into Vibram 5 fingers. So again, super flat, 5 toes, kind of weird looking. And they basically said, well, we like some of what they're doing, and part of that is pitch of the shoe from heel to toe, the angle there. But they didn't like the lack of cushion. So what they decided to do is go the opposite way and try and find a material that would still kind of flex with your foot, but give you a really good amount of cushion and last for a long time.
Inside as opposed to.
The midsole, no, yeah, I mean, you are sitting down here though, and so that's kind of one of the interesting things about this shoe. What's the same between something like this and a Vibram 5 finger is the pitch of that foot. And so if I'm kind of sitting my foot flat on the ground, it's really obvious, but the height underneath my heel is the same underneath as the height underneath the ball of my foot, right? Everything's flat, 100%. When you get into a traditional shoe, with this guy, you're going to be up 10 or 12 millimeters higher in the heel, okay? A lot of that's from them watching people as you start to introduce material underneath their foot. You're starting to see a bit more motion, and they're trying to compensate for that over probably 30 years at this point. And so this helps to take that initial shock there at your heel where you don't have it, especially for walking, it's great, and transition that forward. Not everybody finds that is 100% comfortable. So we have a range of shoes now that go from all the way flat to 12 or 14 millimeters of height in the heel. And it just depends on kind of all that we're talking about there, and then the mechanics that we look at too, and then your preferences. So you've got some shape, you've got some support with this extra stiff piece there, and there's a wide range between this guy and the guy that's being passed around that's like really very flexible.
What's the widest available extra support?
We'll do 40. Yeah. And that would be the other thing as well, is that just like a suit, they're not all going to fit the same. Does that make sense? So basically we use a Brannock device as well, so we can get into that. But when we measure your foot with the Brannock device, it's going to give us a starting point. Or if I say, hey, what size do you wear? You say, 10-2E. Great, it's a good starting point. But you might find that size is actually going to change. Okay. And so what we're looking at when we're looking at kind of a proper fit is we're going to want to make sure that, as we were talking about earlier, your foot actually sits all the way on the sole of the shoe. You don't have this big overhang one side or the other. There might be a touch right in through there. But right in through the front especially, you want to make sure that's good. You also want to make sure that you actually have space up in the toe. And this is like, if I had, well, I guess I sell a shoe, but if I had a dime for every time that somebody came in and said they were one size, and when you put that size on, their toe is right at the end. And again, this comes from maybe dress shoes as well, right? It doesn't necessarily make that a proper fit for active walking or running or even just being on your feet all day.
Like it can't come.
Yeah, because what that does is, again, if you're kind of looking at your foot, I don't know if you've gone through everything that happens in your foot.
No, and we haven't gone through the whole
So
mechanics.
think about your big toe as like a lever for your arch, right? And if you keep that big toe snugged way up into the front of the shoe, it's not going to be able to function properly. You got to give it some independence. You got to let it flex a little bit. So we're actually trying to fit, and the shoe companies know this, and so that's why they're designing shoes with certain shapes up front. But you need to allow your toes to have some spread up in the front. At the end of a long day, or at the end of a long run, or a hike, or a walk, your feet are also swelling, right? So we want to make sure that we're fitting you not only for the beginning of the day, but definitely for the end of the day. And we've all been there where we want to just tear the shoe off our foot at the end of the day, and you don't want to wear them. If we get things fit properly, that usually isn't an issue. And we generally will fit like we're treating somebody who's running a marathon, which is...
And that one that you had there
Yeah.
is like the opposite of a Birkenstock. Birkenstock is tilted backwards.
Yeah,
That
it's
one
definitely not a negative offset.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not exactly sure of all the offsets that Birkenstock might have with their...
Well, yeah.
Yeah. But ultimately, you'd rather not want to drop your heel down too much either. At that point, I would stop at level. Shape ups probably got into some trouble because of the way that they either rock your heel back and then forward again. And these kind of work a little like shape ups, but they're not.
No.
So yeah, people look at that.
I remember that.
Yeah.
Put him in your shoes and just buy more.
So what our job is, I guess, is I've talked a lot about a lot of different things. We try to take all that information and help you guys find your shoe so you don't have to listen to me talk about this all day. Yeah.
You might be working towards this, so stop me if I'm...
Yeah, no.
You told us a lot of things we need to be concerned about, or know about.
Yeah.
Haven't really gotten much into details about how you figure those things out. Is that kind of beyond the scope of what we can talk about tonight?
No, not at all. So,
So you talked about, whether you need to find out whether you need
Yeah.
that rotation or if you want it stiff. How do I know?
Go.
well, that's basically what we do, is we take a look at that objectively and mechanically, right? So we'll get you down to your bare feet. We start with just kind of some standing. It's just as simple as just standing up on one foot and seeing what that initial reaction of your ankle is, into basically a standing squat. Take a look at the both the tracking of the knee, but also kind of the amount of elasticity you have in your Achilles and your calf. And then we're going to get into just a quick gait analysis walking. So I'm actually having you walk, 50 yards and back, more or less, depending on the size of the store. 'Cause we have a few. And then taking a look at how that knee and that ankle track. In the meantime, we're talking about all your history. We're figuring out where you're coming from, where you're going, and then we'll do the same thing. I'll watch you run, and we see how that goes. And then from there, I start to talk about, hey, here's what's going on with your feet. We take a look at the shape of your foot. We measure it with the Brandt device. And then we kind of say, okay, well, based on the shape of your foot and what size we're looking at, your activity, and then how everything's mechanically working, I want to go grab you a shoe.
Hang on a sec. Okay.
Not necessarily the shoe. Don't take this personally. Grab you this shoe. You try this on, and then we say, okay,
Okay.
let's see how this fits. Make sure everything's fitting properly. Then I'm watching you walk and run again. So we're doing that again and again and again, getting your feedback, and then taking that and saying, okay, well
You
that.
have like a treadmill, or we running up and down the aisles?
We have the up and down the aisles. We have treadmills in 2 of the stores. I like to, honestly, especially if you're running, I like to get you outside. I'll watch you outside unless it's like really nasty out.
And I've been to this store, they'll usually bring out like 4 or 5 different shoes.
Oh, yeah.
Because the thing is, like you said, everybody's foot is different, so you have to make sure that you're trying, and they have no problem doing that. But usually they come out with the first 2 shoes in the recommendation, and they hit it dead on. You know, within the first couple of shoes you got there, usually dead on, and it's exactly what you need, so.
So yeah, like a company like Brooks or Asics or Nike, you know, in a running shoe, they're going to make 12 different models. They're not going to try and make too many models that do the same thing as another model. So they have a gradient of how they design those shoes. And so likewise, our shoe wall is built into different types of categories to support cushion and activity. But yeah, I mean, there's things that you definitely can't see until you get a shoe on a person's foot too. So your barefoot mechanics could look one way. I put you into a shoe, add a new layer to the whole mix, and that will change how things look drastically. But yeah, we're always trying to basically keep that knee and that ankle lining up properly as you're putting weight down on your foot and coming forward.
Do you sell hiking shoes and trail shoes?
We do carry trail shoes. He's got one right there. They're trail running shoes, which kind of throws
Yeah.
people off at times. I did Monadnock yesterday with my wife, and we were both in running shoes, and it was A-okay. There's some scrambling going on there. My feet feel fine. My legs feel fine. She's a little sore because I didn't think she really thought it was going to be quite that much of a hike. But that's
Trail
okay.
running in New Hampshire is tricky.
Yeah. Oh, totally. Yeah. And there's a lot of good trails even in Concord. So I mean, it's a pretty trail heavy. So we do carry a lot of those shoes, but they're going to be a little bit lighter than a hiking boot. They're going to generally be cut below the ankle. Really, because you're trying to kind of maximize the natural stability of the foot. You're not trying to force that foot, and you're not generally walking too much under load. You know, you're usually in a pretty light pack or with nothing on. But we do carry Saucony, New Balance, Brooks. We got
New
some
Balance
other-
has 60.
They do make 6Es. It's not something we carry in stock. We always can order it. I mean, any shoe that they make, we can order it. Yeah, I mean, but you might be surprised at how a 4E fits.
Yeah, or another style.
Yeah, I mean, if the last is narrow and you go to a 6E, you go to a straighter last, or a last that's a little bit wider than the forefoot, you might go down to a 4E or 2. But I mean, really, we just kind of think of it as we're on your feet's side. I mean, that's really what they're there for. So we don't really care what it is. We don't care what company it is, as long as it works for you. Then-
So for the majority of new shoes and their components, arch support is not the number one.
Having an insert that's an orthotic, that's trying to provide structure to your arch, is definitely not their top priority. Most people that come in the store,
No, I mean as an integral part of all those shoes
yeah,
right there.
it's not the, yeah. It's really about providing the base in which your arch can perform itself. But I mean, that being said, you can always add a custom orthotic.
No, but getting your foot to work as a whole
Yeah.
and have the room at the end of the toe.
Yeah, it's not even just your foot. We really want to think about the whole leg, you know, because it's not just your foot that's absorbing that shock. It's your whole
And
body.
Could cause,
We had someone online ask if you guys carry cleats.
We do not carry cleats.
Okay.
But you
Like soccer
do
cleats. Or you're
carry,
talking about cross-country spikes?
they carry cross-country
Oh,
spikes,
yeah.
though.
Okay.
Cross-country spikes, track spikes, we do carry that, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So,
Unfortunately, soccer cleats are kind of stuck.
Okay.
Could you get an idea of those 5 when you
Not,
walk?
I could, yeah.
you don't carry cycling.
You don't. We stay very specialized. I mean, again, I think these shoes, your walking gait and your running gait, for most people are going to be relatively similar. You're just changing the impact level. So, yeah. So, I mean, they make great walking shoes as well.
so I just want to say, we usually go about 30 minutes.
How far are we?
We're over, but for those of you that have to go, and have to go, please feel free to. I always, allow people to go, but if you have questions to ask, ask Jeremiah and go through
I'm going to
those
give
things.
every coupon.
Because, everybody gets a coupon, huh? So, but I want to say thank you to those that are leaving. Thank you very, very much for everything. I hope it taught you something about whether it be a work shoe or sneaker, something that's good
We can get you the hints.
for you.
You can carry some over the counter.
Okay. So those are the big things that are going. So I just want to give you guys the opportunity. He has some coupons if you want.
Yeah.
Want.
Do you want us to record?
Huh?
Do you want us to?
And everybody on staff can do this.
Yeah, we can separate.
Just one.
Thanks, everybody.